Hello everyone, Jen DeBelle here for Country Craft Creations, and today I'm going to show you the first portion of an idea that I had. This kind of sparked with the idea of junk journals and people asking for more tutorials on that. I've not made a lot of junk journals, as I mentioned in my DT haul video, but what I have done mostly is actual mini albums. So what I wanted to do when I received my DT package with this gorgeous Love Letters paper that Tamara has created, this has a very vintage vibe, and I love that feminine vintage look with all the whitewashed woods and the script and the pinks and the roses, just very pretty. So what I want to do is I'm going to create what I'm calling a vintage memory keeper. So this is going to kind of combine actual mini album creating in a clean and simple way with junk journaling. So rather than taking all of recycled things that you would do normally in a junk journal, I'm going to use scraps and some different laces, some different seam binding to create this, but I'm going to create an actual structured album that will just have more of a vintage vibe. Hopefully that makes sense, and you'll see as I go forward. So what I'm going to do first is create my cover. And I'm going to set aside this beautiful paper so I can show you how I'm going to do that. So what I have here, I unfortunately don't have any of the artisan craft cardstock right now, but I do have this. That I like this because it looks kind of like a paper bag. This craft cardstock I have in my stash, so any craft cardstock will work. It works really well with vintage papers. And so I am going to take this and I'm going to create a cover. So right now I'm going to set aside all of this and just show you what we'll be working with. So you're going to want your regular chipboard weight. This is the heavier weight chipboard. You can use the thinner as well. This is just what I had on hand right in front of me when I cut these. So I'm going to make this a 5.5 by 9.5, and it's going to fold. So I need 2 of the pieces of chipboard cut to 5.5 by 9.5 inches. 2 spines that are going to be 2 inches by 9.5 inches. And then I'm going to have a 2.5 by 9.5 inch flap that's going to come across the front of the album. So basically we'll have 2 folds here, and then this will fold over our front. And we're going to do a fun little technique with that as well. So let's just dive into what you need to do this. I'm going to move my cutter off to the side here. You're going to need 2 sheets of the 12 by 12. Unless you have super long paper, you could also use a paper bag and just pull it apart and burnish it down and use it that way. I'm going to use this craft cardstock, and I know that when I laid these out, I set them all across the table the way that they would line up with about 1/8 of an inch of space in between them. It came out to be, I believe it was about 18 inches. So I know that I want 1 inch on either side to fold in. So I'm going to want this to measure 1 inch at least of the paper all the way around so that I can wrap it, because I'm going to do this in a wrapped method. So I get, yes, it's about 18. So I want about 20 inches of paper this way, and that would mean I would need 11.5 this way. But since I'm using 12 by 12 paper, I'm not going to cut that 1/2 inch off. I'm just going to have a little bit more than 1 inch that folds in, and that's totally fine. So first I am going to put these 2 pieces of paper together, and you can use glue, you can use score tape. I think I'm going to actually use score tape for this just because I want to use it as a guideline. So I'm going to put this score tape right along the edge of one of the pieces of, of 12 by 12 craft cardstock. And I've got a little more than I wanted there, so I'm just going to go in with my scissors. And I'm going to snip that excess score tape off the end. So I don't need that excess, but I do want full coverage. So going over a little and snipping a little off is better than not having enough of that score tape. So then I'm just going to take a bone folder and burnish all of that tape down. Peel that backing off. Then we're going to bring in our other 12 by 12 sheet of kraft and just kind of use that glue line from your score tape as a guide when you put this together. And we're just going to line that up. Try to get this as straight as you possibly can. And I have mine right, and sometimes cardstock that you purchase from the craft stores, it's not always the same size. So as you can see, I have a little bit extra up there, but that's going to wrap in, so it's not going to matter. So then what we're going to do is we're going to grab, I'm trying to make some more room here on my desk. I have too many things. Apologize for that. Too many things laying around. So now I have this big sheet of the craft cardstock that's put together. And when you put this together like this and it's glued, we will actually have 23.5 by 12. And that's fine. We can cut some of the edges off if we need to. Or you can pre-cut that if you want. If you just want that exact 20 inches, you can do that as well. So then what I want to do is I want to get my a different glue. Okay, so I'm actually going to use tacky glue for this portion. It is a thicker glue and it tacks really quickly to the chipboard. You can use any adhesive for this. This is just a preference that I have when it comes to chipboard on paper. I like to use a little bit tackier glue for this portion. So now I have that. I'm just going to bring this over to about a little more than an inch from the side because we know we have a little extra. So we're going to go ahead and set that down on there. I'm just going to kind of let that sit, burnish it out a little if we need to, and just check that we're about the same at the top and the bottom. And I am not, so I'm going to, and you can put this on your scoreboard as well. Any way that you have method-wise for wrapping your chipboard is perfectly fine. We just want it to line up in the end as well as possible. So then we're going to grab one of our 2.5 by 9.5 pieces. And I'm going to get that tacky glue on there. And I'm making a big old mess, aren't I? Let's get a little more over here. The only bad thing about this tacky glue is that it does not like to come out of the bottle as quickly as I would like it to sometimes. And I'm just going to take one of my nifty spacers. And I am going to line it up with that. So I make sure I get that 1/8 of an inch of space in between there. All right. Whoops, and it slid. Okay, so after my little blunder with my lamp here, back, I'm just going to go ahead and go on to the next piece, which is our next 5.5 by 9.5. You could also do this with score tape or with a Xyron machine, which I frequently use when I create albums. I'll grab my spacer bar, line that up. Oh, that didn't work out now, did it? Let's put that all the way down in there. All right. And you will start to feel, if you are using this tacky glue style glue, you'll start to feel a little resistance in the paper, like it wants to warp, and that's fine. I'm gonna actually turn mine over now that the glue is dried a little and run my large smoother across here, just to make sure that that glue is not going to leave a bunch of bubbles. Because like I said, it is a tacky glue, so it acts a little differently than our typical art glitter glue and such. All right, we're going to flip that back over and apply our next two pieces. So you're going to have your next spine of 2" by 9.5. This is our second spine. I feel like that needs more. Grab my spacer. And because these spacers from Country Craft Creations are translucent, it's really nice because you can see if you're lining up at the bottom and the top on your chipboards. And that's one of the reasons that I love to use these. All right, just make sure we get an even amount of space. Then our final piece is this 2.5 by 9.5" flap, and this will be what folds over. And like I said, we'll be doing a kind of fun technique with that as far as a closure. Get this all glued up, and we're almost ready to wrap. Pull in my spacer, eyeball top and bottom. That's good. All right, now I'm going to flip this, make sure that that glue is nice and smooth. So we want a nice adherence. Like I said, this is kind of a combination between a junk journaling and just regular album creating. I kind of wanted to juxtapose the two and into one fun creation. So as you can see over here, we do have quite a bit more than we need. So we're just going to, you know what, I'm going to leave this for now. So we're going to go ahead and start bending our paper at the top and the bottom. Okay. And don't worry about that flap down there just yet. We're just going to get all this flattened out on both sides. All right, so now you can see that we have this part ready to go. What we're going to do now is we are going to, I'm going to get rid of this tacky glue. I no longer need that. What I do need is some score tape. I'm just going to go ahead and use, as soon as I can find my score tape. Oh, here we go. So we're just going to go ahead and grab our score tape, and we're going to go all the way around. And don't worry about your dips where the chipboard has the 1/8 of an inch of space. Just go right over it. It's totally fine. Okay, so we have score tape going across. I'm going to burnish all that score tape down nicely. And then what I want to do is peel that score tape off. We are going to take our normal glue. I'm using art glitter, and I'm just going to run a bead of glue down that score, that fold line, and also add some to the flap itself, all the way down. And then I'm just going to grab right around the middle, which is just past where we connected the paper. And I'm just going to work my way down here, sticking that down. Try to pull and stick as you go. I just want to run our bone folder right down that edge just to make sure that we're getting all of that paper. And burnish it there. Okay, let's flip it and do the same thing on the other side. Just going to make sure our score tape is nice and burnished. Run our bead of glue down into that crevice and then onto the flaps. Pull off our score tape backing. And start right there at that middle, like I said, up to about right where the papers met to bring them together. And work down one side. And then down the other. Okay. Just give it a good burnish on every panel. I see we're going to get some spots where it doesn't stick. Just grab your glue with your fine tip on it and just kind of sneak it under there to add that little extra glue. And then I would suggest grabbing a towel when you burnish this, because it probably will bring out some of the glue. But we want to make sure we get a nice snug connection between the paper and the chipboard. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and run my bone folder across that whole edge just to where the chipboard ends. And that just gives you a nice solid flat edge, and I like that look. This is optional, you don't have to do this. It's just a preference. And I use the back side of my bone folder. So now what we're going to do is we want to just start bending our pieces. And as you can see, it's going to start resisting a little. And you don't want that, so you want to make sure that when you bend these, that you're also burnishing the paper underneath. And I can tell that this one is going to lift, so I'm just going to give it a good burnish. Burnish carefully so that you don't rip your papers. And there we go. So now we have that portion done. We can go along here and burnish all that excess down. So we get a nice good score line there on both sides. And we're just going to go in and we're going to miter these. So, move my glue out of the way for a moment. Just going to go in with scissors for this. And for this one with the shorter, we're just going to go in and we're going to clip off just to that edge. We'll make sure there's some left over. And we're going to do the same. You don't want to go all the way down to the chipboard because we don't want it to show. So keep that in mind. Then you're going to have this little itty bitty flap that you can fold over and snip off as well. We won't need that. But be mindful when you snip this off that you're going above where the chipboard ends. You don't want to cut too much off. We're going to be able to bend this, so we don't want to take that all off. So for this end, I'm going to do the same thing, but first I am going to actually cut this down because we have way too much here, which is fine. And don't throw away scraps, especially if you do make junk journals. You can always use the scraps later, especially this kind of paper. So I'm going to go right about 1/8 of an inch above that corner. And I'm going to pull this back, snip that off. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side. So flip this over. It is a little bit harder to put this on video because it is such a big project. So I apologize for that. Go ahead and just snip off that edge. Snip them out. So now we have our ends. Now, we're just going to go down here to this end. And we're going to go ahead and put some glue, just like we did on the sides, right down in that crevice. And then we're going to glue up this flap here. And you can do this with score tape as well. I just prefer this method. And also I would suggest, if you do have any of that paper left over here, that you burnish it down. So you get a nice crisp. You want to get this all the way burnished. You can see I have some glue starting to seep. That is fine. So we have our towel for. I'm going to go ahead and run my larger smoother up this. Get all that excess glue out of there. And then I'm going to flip to the other end. And we're going to do the same thing. Just be mindful of any paper that's hanging over and just kind of push it down from that little flap that we cut off. There might be just a little bit of overhang. So just push it down up against your chipboard. We're going to push this in just a bit, just like in the last one. And do the exact same thing. I'm going to run glue all the way along there, up into that crevice. Okay, I just want to run this up. All right. Now, I had a little much glue there, didn't I? Go ahead and run this. Make sure all of that gets nice and adhered. You can see when you push down nice and hard, all of that excess glue will come to the surface. So you don't want all that mess. So now we have a nice wrapped chipboard. And this will close like so. Whoops, I got something stuck to it already. Must have had something on my desk. So this will close like so. And then this will close over it like this. So we'll have this nice flap closure when you're finished. Now we're going to make the piece that goes on the inside. And you can do this with the same craft cardstock, or you can do it with something else. Okay, so what you will need for this inside piece, I've measured it out. And if you want to do the same, I have a 12 by 9 3/8 inch tall piece, as well as a 6 1/4 inch wide by 9 3/8. And I am going to glue these papers together. Just get a nice strip of my glue there. And kind of line it up. So you want this to be pretty straight. Now we're going to take this and we are going to put it on the inside here. And I'm again going to use that tacky glue that I like. I'm going to flip this over. And I'm just going to run that tacky glue all the way around the edges. All right, hopefully you can see that in the camera. I'm just going to go ahead and keep going with it and just make a few passes with the tacky glue. This will stick. Like I said, the Aleen's, I'm not quite sure how you pronounce it. It's very sticky and thicker. And you can use any glue for this. This is, like I said before, just my preference for this portion of my album. Okay, so then we're just going to flip that over. Give yourself about 1/4 of an inch of space all the way around when putting this down. And you could also do this with colored paper if you wanted like a matte that was a different color than the album itself. You can do that as well. I am choosing to just make it all the same colors. And I am not lining up perfectly here. I'm not quite sure why this is happening. In the end, this will all be covered with the beautiful Love Letters paper. So then I'm just going to take that big scraper. I'm going to really push down all of that tacky glue. Spread it as good as I can. Mindful of any bubbles. Just push it all out. Flip it to the other side and do the same. As you can see, that glue, it does redistribute itself around when you push down, and you get lots on the edges. So then I'm just going to bring in my towel, clean that all up. All around these edges where I have glue. And then I just like to go around and look at any of the edges that might be lifting, like the glue didn't distribute, and just use my art glitter for this. I do see a little bit here. It's not too bad, but I think it's okay. All right. So you kind of want to let this dry a little bit. Like I said, the tacky glue is a quicker drying adhesive, if that's what you're using. If you're not using a fast tack glue, then you do need to really let this dry before you start doing any of the bending. Otherwise, your paper will just crack. And I'm just going to nicely start to push that spine together. And as you can see, I'm getting a little bit of resistance with mine. So I'm just going to go back in. As you can see, some of this bumpiness. I'm going to go back in with this bone folder here and just gently, without poking it through the paper, try to give it a burnish and try to train that paper to bend a little bit more, because that's what we want. We want the outcome to be nice and finished, but we don't want a bunch of cracked paper. So just kind of working that edge, and then I'll have this come up and this will close, and just make sure that these are laying down. Okay, so now we have our cover, and I will continue with the decorating. So now that we have our base album made, and I've given it some time to dry and set and just worked these score lines and folds a little bit to get the paper to train the way I wanted it to. And I've already drawn some lines here on the inside of where I'm going to put my holes for stitching the stretch cord through for our signatures, which I will show you how I've made these as well. But for this part, I'm going to show you how I'm going to decorate the outside of the album. So when you close this, this is going to be our album. We're going to open this like so, and our signatures will be here, and we'll have some fun pockets and such here as well. But what I want to show you is how I am going to decorate the outside cover, and I'll tell you what you need for that. We're going to lay this down over here. So I have cut from this gorgeous, the whitewashed oak color of the Love Letters paper. I've also cut 2 pieces of this pink with this. And then I haven't decided yet which one of these. Now, I love these burnt edge pieces. They're just gorgeous, but I'm trying, once we get everything placed on here, I'm going to decide which one of these, if I want the more roses showing, or if I prefer this one. So we'll cut those together. So what you're going to need here, I've also used the olive colored, I'm not quite sure what she calls this. Okay, yes, I did check that. It is the olive green artisan cardstock. So you're going to need 2 of these that measure 5 3/8 by 9 3/8. These are just our mats. We're also going to need 2 that measure 1 7/8 by 9 3/8. And then for that front flap, which is a little larger than our spines, you're going to want 2 3/8 by 9 3/8. This way. So I'm going to move my scoreboard out of the way momentarily, and we are going to get started. So let's start with our green mats, and I'm just going to go ahead and put those on. You just want to make sure that this has about 1/8 of an inch of that kraft base showing through. Okay. And then I'm going to glue down one of my spine pieces. Try to line that up with the top and bottom of the paper here. And I had made some pencil lines on this for my cutting, and I'm just going to go through and get rid of those so they don't show. I'm going to do a little distressing with some distress ink on the edges of this when we're done. So if there's a little bit of pencil marks left over from something, don't worry about it. I'm going to go ahead and put our back mat on. Then we have have one more spine and our flat piece. And there we have our mats all the way down. So now you just want to lay out your pieces so you can see where they are going to end up. This one actually goes here, and this one goes here, I do believe. Just want to make sure. It looks like this one did not cut quite right. Okay, so now we're going to put on these, but before we do that, I mentioned that this is junk journal meets regular album meets folio. So I'm going to just combine this beautiful paper into a vintage look. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a distressing tool. Now this is an older Prima tool. A lot of crafters have this in their stash. However, if you don't have this, you can use the edge of your scissors, or you can use a different paper distressing tool. And I'm just going to gently go around the edges of my paper just to give it kind of a little bit of a shredded look, but not too much. And I will show you as soon as I get this last edge done here. And yes, this does make a bit of a mess because it is tearing your paper, but as you can see there, you get that kind of roughed up edge, so to speak. I'm just going to do that all the way around all of these papers. And don't be afraid if you make a little nick like this, it just looks more distressed. Again, this is combining a junk journal with a regular album, so having some little imperfections makes it look even more like a junk journal. So then we're going to take, I'm using Vintage Photo. You can use any of the brown distress inks, and I'm just going to go around the edges with my tool. Just get a little of that ink edge. Also gives it a little bit more of a vintage look. Okay, so set this aside. Now we're going to glue this down, and I'm going to show you when you glue this down, because I have a little technique for making this look even more distressed. We're not going to go all the way to the outside. Most of us don't anyways, but you want to leave a little, about, not quite, maybe a little more than 1/8, but not quite 1/4 of an inch of paper that does not have glue on it. You just want to be able to get either your fingernail or a tool just under the very beginning of the edge of the paper. So I'm going to get all my glue on here. I'm going to put that down, leaving that little bit of that beautiful olive artisan cardstock showing. Okay. And then just gently go down. Remember, be mindful of that little bit of space around the edge that you don't want your glue pushed into. And then I use my fingernail. You can use a tool to do this. And I just push the paper down and run my fingernail all the way up underneath of there. And it just kind of lifts that papered edge that we just distressed a little bit more. And if you pull up too much, just push it back down. It's easy peasy. It just kind of ripples your paper a little bit too, so that it looks more worn, I guess you could say. And there we have this wonderful edge on our paper that is lifted to a little bit. And I'm going to do the same thing with the back piece. Next, we're going to do the spines here. Just want to make sure that my paper, be mindful that my hearts need to go right side up. And we have a clog. And you can cut from the papers. These papers are all very gorgeous and they all coordinate. So you can cut your pieces from any of the papers that you like, because they all will line up. And I actually just discovered I forgot to do my distressing. So I'm going to attempt to do this with the glue on there. Probably get a little glue on my fingers, but that's all right. It can still be done. Go ahead and grab some more ink here. And I like the vintage photo when I'm inking using distress inks for this method, because of the craft background, and it just has more of a vintage feel than some of the other browns. But you could also use walnut stain if you wanted a little bit darker. There's also the frayed burlap, which is a little bit less of a dark color. And I'm going to re-glue this since I messed up there. Add a little more glue here. Make sure my hearts are right side up. Line that up with the paper next to it. And there we go. Just going to push in the middle so I can run around it with my fingernail. Get that little bit more of a distressed look. And you will get inky fingers from this method, I will warn you. And there we have the first one. Now this time I'm going to do it correctly and put this up first. And like I said, you don't have to be exact in your distressing. You can choose not to do this part as well if you don't want to. And I was also going to show you, if you don't have a distressing tool, you can take the edge of scissors, if you're careful, and do the exact same thing. As you can see, this is roughing up my edges. That's the goal here, is just to get those edges a little bit rough. It doesn't have to be a special tool. I just happen to have this. Actually had this for years. Go run my distress ink around. And distressing the edges also, it grabs the ink really well because you're roughing up that core of the paper. So that linen paper inside there really picks up the ink. And you can see, I mean, just look at the distressed look there. I love it. Go ahead and put this piece on. All right, so last we have our little flap here that needs to go on. And I did choose this piece here. And I'm going to go ahead and do my quick distress work here. Grab some vintage photo ink. Put that right on there. A little bit off there. And there we have our album in its entirety covered. Okay, so I've got those all distressed and I have inked them off camera. So we are going to put these pieces on, starting with this one. Okay, so now we have our cover and we have our inside.